In the heart of the azure citadel, a palace carved from crystalline mountains and veiled in eternal snows, silence reigned, until it didn't. The stillness shattered like thin ice beneath the thunder of imperial boots and the flustered chirps of 1,000 courtiers scrambling to make way for the most unexpected guest the galaxy had ever seen. A human man named Torin. Torin was nobody. At least, that's what he'd been before he saved a life no one knew existed. Weeks earlier, during the brutal skirmish on the desert moon of Zyrak 7, a forgotten dust ball caught in the crossfire between warring star factions. He'd stumbled upon something curled beneath the carcass of a downed sky skiff. Small, trembling, and wrapped in tattered silver robes, she'd looked more like a lost doll than royalty. Her skin shimmered like crushed amethyst under the twin suns, her hair a cascade of snow-white strands that tangled in the wind like ghostly silk. She blinked up at him with eyes the color of molten gold and whispered, "Can I eat with you, human?" He'd nearly dropped his ration pack. No one spoke basic out here. No one, especially not someone who looked like she'd been plucked from a celestial dream. But when enemy scouts closed in, he didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, shielded her with his body, and carried her through sandstorms and plasma fire until they reached a neutral salvage station. He never asked her name. She never gave it. But the moment he handed her over to the waiting medics, she gripped his wrist and whispered, "You will be remembered." He laughed it off. Humans were insects in the galactic theater, disposable, invisible. But the galaxy, it turned out, had a terrible memory for names and an excellent one for deeds. Her name was Lyra Valith, youngest princess of the Shimmering Concord, a coalition of 7 empires bound by blood, magic, and ancient stellar treaties. She'd been on a secret diplomatic mission when her shuttle was sabotaged. Torin hadn't just saved a child. He'd saved the linchpin of interstellar peace. And now, by Concord decree, any ruler whose realm had benefited from that peace, and whose heart still beat, was granted the ancient right of gratitude, which meant he could claim any royal hand in marriage. Torin stood now in the grand reflection hall of the Azure Citadel, sweat pooling beneath his ill-fitting ceremonial tunic. Around him, the palace glittered, ice chandeliers humming with trapped starlight, floors of polished obsidian reflecting constellations that shifted with the mood of the throne world, and towering windows that framed the endless blizzard outside like a painting of chaos held at bay by sheer will. And in front of him, 7 empresses, not just rulers, goddesses, each one descended from dynasties older than Earth's oceans, each one radiating power like a contained supernova. Empress Ziva of the Obsidian Maw sat cross-legged on a floating obsidian throne, her scales shifting from violet to crimson as she watched him. She'd once devoured a rebel fleet with her bare hands, metaphorically, of course. Mostly. To her left lounged Lady Imperator Silyun of the Verdant Spiral, whose hair bloomed with living orchids and whose voice could coax trees to grow in vacuum. Empress Nairi of the Salt Wastes stood rigid in armor woven from dried tears and dried lightning, her eyes hidden behind a veil of salt crystals that chimed with every breath. Then came the triplets of the twin suns, Mara, Kova, and Gel, each ruling a mirrored kingdom orbiting a binary star, their faces identical save for the tattoos that told their individual fates. And finally, at the center of it all, on a throne of frozen song, sat Lyra herself, now crowned Empress of the Concord after her mother's sudden passing. She no longer wore rags. She wore star-forged silks and a diadem that pulsed with the heartbeat of a dying sun. But when her golden eyes met Torin's, they still held that desert moon softness. He swallowed. "I didn't sign up for this." "You didn't have to," Lyra said, her voice carrying through the hall like a chime beneath thunder. "The Concord does not forget. And gratitude, in our law, is a bond stronger than blood." The court erupted, not in anger, but in delighted chaos. Bets were placed. Perfumes flared. A flock of ornamental sky foxes burst from hidden perches, scattering glittering petals that dissolved into poetry midair. Torin had expected exile, maybe a medal, not 7 of the most powerful women in the galaxy lining up to marry him. He wasn't handsome, just sunburnt, scarred, and perpetually tired. He couldn't recite star chants or command gravity waves. He fixed engines. He shared his food. That was it. But that was everything. Back in his temporary chambers, really a repurposed observatory with a bed made of cloud fabric and walls that whispered lullabies, he paced like a caged wolf. A servant droid shaped like a hummingbird hovered near the ceiling. "Petition from Empress Ziva," it chirped. "She offers you a private tour of her lava gardens. Includes complimentary fire walk and soul-binding ceremony." "No," Torin muttered. Lady Imperator Silion requests you join her in the dreaming glade. She will weave your future from moon moss and memory vines. Not today. Empress Nairi has sent a salt crystal dagger. Tradition dictates you either accept it as a betrothal token or shatter it in challenge. Warning. Shattering may trigger a duel to the death. Torin groaned and buried his face in his hands. Why me? Why not some diplomat? Some prince? Some alien? Because, came a gentle voice from the balcony. You saw a child in the sand and gave her your last cracker. He turned. Lyra stood there, barefoot, wrapped in a simple robe, her white hair loose and glowing faintly in the starlight. She looked nothing like an empress now, just the girl from the desert. You didn't know I was royalty, she said, stepping inside. You didn't care. You just cared. I'm not cut out for this, he admitted, sinking onto the cloud bed, which fluffed itself indignantly. I don't know how to choose. I don't even know what they want. They want you, she said simply. Not your title. Not your bloodline. You. The man who gave his water to a stranger while dying of thirst himself. He looked at her, really looked. There was no flirtation in her gaze, no manipulation. Just honesty. And something else. Regret? What if I choose wrong? He asked. You won't, she said. But you must choose with your heart, not your fear. Before he could respond, alarms blared through the palace. Crimson lights slashed across the walls. The hummingbird droid spun in panic. Intruder alert. Outer shield gate breached. Identity. Rogue faction the Bone Choir. Declared extinct 50 cycles ago. Torin was on his feet instantly. Old instincts flared, battle reflexes honed in 100 firefights. Where's the breach? The ice spire, Lyra said, eyes hardening. They're after the Heartstone, the core of our planetary shield. If they destroy it, the blizzards will consume the citadel in minutes. Torin didn't hesitate. Then we stop them. We. Lyra arched a pale brow. You're the Empress. I'm the guy who fixes things. Let's fix this. She smiled, just a flicker, but it lit the room like sunrise. They ran through corridors that twisted like frozen rivers, past guards scrambling to form lines, past panicking courtiers hiding behind tapestries that wept protective charms. The ice spire loomed ahead, a needle of glacial crystal piercing the storm clouds. Already, black-armored figures swarmed its base, their weapons crackling with antimatter charges. Torin recognized their insignia, the Bone Choir, fanatics who believed all sentient life was a disease on the universe. They'd tried to sterilize 3 systems before vanishing. Now they'd returned with a vengeance. Stay behind me, Torin growled, grabbing a fallen guard's pulse rifle. I'm the Empress, Lyra said, stepping past him. I don't stay behind. Before he could argue, she raised her hands. The air shimmered. Ice shards erupted from the ground, impaling 2 attackers. Frost spiraled from her fingertips, freezing a third mid-leap. Torin gaped. You never told me you could do that. You never asked, she shot back, already sprinting toward the spire's entrance. Inside, the spire was a cathedral of light and cold. At its center, floating in a column of aurora blue energy, pulsed the Heartstone, a geode the size of a small car, thrumming with planetary life force. Around it, 5 Bone Choir zealots were planting charges. Torin opened fire. His shots were precise, knees, shoulders, weapon hands. He wasn't here to kill, but the zealots weren't so kind. One hurled a sonic grenade. The blast knocked Lyra backward. She hit the wall with a cry. Torin's vision went red. He charged, using cover, flipping over ice benches, disarming one zealot with a brutal kick. Another lunged at Lyra. She was dazed, blood trickling from her temple. But Torin slammed into him like a comet, driving his elbow into the fanatic's throat. The last 2 zealots activated the charges. 30 seconds to detonation, one cackled. Torin didn't think. He sprinted to the Heartstone, ripped open the control panel with his bare hands, and started rewiring. His fingers moved faster than thought, years of jury-rigging starship engines kicking in. Sparks flew. Smoke curled. Lyra staggered to her feet and placed her palms on the stone. I'll stabilize the field, she gasped. You defuse the core. He found the primary charge, a nest of quantum detonators wrapped around the stone's base. 10 seconds. His hands shook. 9. He yanked the wrong wire, alarms wailed. 8. He cursed, rewired, prayed. 5. The detonation sequence stuttered. 3. He pulled the master fuse. Silence. The charges powered down. Torin collapsed against the stone, breathing hard. Lyra sank beside him, her purple skin pale with exhaustion. Outside, the storm raged, but the shield held. Moments later, Imperial guards flooded in, binding the surviving zealots. Medics rushed to Lyra, but she waved them off. "You saved us," she whispered to Torin. "I saved a rock," he said, wiping blood from his brow. "You saved the world." She laughed softly, the same laugh he'd heard in the desert. Back in the palace, the mood had shifted. The empresses no longer saw Torin as a curiosity. They saw him as a protector, a warrior, a man who'd faced annihilation and rewired fate with his own hands. That evening, the court hosted the Feast of Gratitude, a banquet where each empress would present her final courtship offering. Torin sat at the head of the table, still in his scorched tunic, flanked by Lyra and Ziva, who kept trying to feed him flaming dates with her claws. Silyun had woven a crown of bioluminescent vines for him. Nairi offered him a new dagger, this one inscribed with his name in salt script. The triplets harmonized a song that made the wine glasses weep. It should have been glorious, but Torin felt hollow, because he kept seeing Lyra's face in the ice spire, not as an empress, but as the girl who'd asked for a meal in the middle of a war. The girl he'd carried through hell because it was right, not because he wanted reward. And yet he couldn't choose her. The Concord needed her free, unbound. Marriage to a human, it would fracture the alliance. He knew that. She knew that. So he smiled, ate the flaming dates, nearly choking, and pretended his heart wasn't breaking. Later, alone on the starlight terrace, he stared into the blizzard. The cold bit his cheeks. Good. Kept him awake. "You're avoiding me," Lyra said from behind. He didn't turn. "I'm trying not to ruin everything." "You already did," she said softly. "In the best way." He finally looked at her. Her golden eyes held galaxies. "What if I don't want any of them?" he asked. "What if I just want you? Not as empress. Just Lyra." She stepped closer. Snowflakes melted before they touched her skin. "The law is clear," she murmured. "But laws can be rewritten." Before he could respond, a new alarm pierced the night. Not of invasion, but of arrival. A royal barge, larger than any seen before, descended through the storm. Its hull bore no insignia, but its energy signature ancient, forbidden. "The veiled sovereign," Lyra whispered, her face paling. "She hasn't left the dark rift in 1,000 years." The court gathered in panic as the barge docked. From its ramp emerged a figure cloaked in living shadow, her form shifting like smoke. When she spoke, her voice echoed with the weight of dead stars. "I, Zalthra, last empress of the forgotten court, claim the right of gratitude." Silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Torin's stomach dropped. He'd read about her myth, monster, martyr. She'd ruled a civilization that sacrificed itself to stop the first great entropy wave. She was thought dead. "You cannot," Lyra said, stepping forward. "The forgotten court has no standing in the Concord." "I saved your ancestors," Zalthra said, her cloak parting slightly to reveal eyes like black holes. "When the void came, my people held it back long enough for yours to flee. That debt was never repaid." Lyra faltered. It was true. Hidden in the oldest archives, acknowledged in secret rites. Torin felt the walls closing in. 8 empresses now. And this one, she radiated finality, like standing before time itself. Zalthra turned her gaze to him. "I do not offer gardens or crowns, human. I offer purpose. Rule beside me in the rift. Guard the edge of everything. Be more than a husband, be a sentinel." He looked at her, then at Lyra, then at the storm beyond. He had no answer, but as the snow swirled and the palace hummed with dread and desire, Torin Valeth. No, just Torin, the engine fixer, the cracker sharer, the human who'd once saved a girl in the sand. Knew one thing for certain. His choice would shake the stars, and he still had no idea what to do. The next morning, the palace thrummed with tension so thick it could be carved into jewelry. Courtiers whispered behind jeweled fans, their eyes darting between the newly arrived veiled sovereign and the human who now slept, fitfully, beneath a canopy woven from dream silk and starlight. Torin hadn't slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Zalthra's void-like gaze, heard her offer, "Be more than a husband, be a sentinel." He rose before dawn, slipping out of his chambers barefoot, still in the same scorched tunic. The palace was quieter now. The blizzard outside softened to a hush, as if holding its breath. He wandered through the hall of echoing vows, where generations of Concord rulers had sworn oaths on the bones of extinct gods. Portraits watched him, empresses with eyes like nebulas, warriors with crowns of comet tails. None looked like him, none ever would. He reached the Archive of Whispers, a sealed chamber deep beneath the citadel, accessible only to the ruling Empress, or those she permitted. To his surprise, the doors parted without command. Inside, Lyra stood bathed in the glow of floating data orbs, her white hair tied back, her expression grim. She didn't turn as he entered. "You came," she said. "I couldn't sleep," he replied. "And I needed answers." She gestured to a hologram flickering above a pedestal, a star map pulsing with crimson markers. The Bone Choir didn't act alone. Their attack was a distraction. Torin frowned. "For what?" "For this." She tapped the map. A new symbol appeared, a spiraling glyph shaped like a closing eye. The Eye of Morn, a relic thought lost during the first collapse. It doesn't destroy planets, it unravels memory, erases entire civilizations from history, as if they never existed. His blood ran cold. "And someone's looking for it." "Worse," Lyra said. "Someone already has it." The choir's leader didn't die in the spire. He escaped with a data crystal. And guess who just intercepted a coded transmission from the Dark Rift? Her golden eyes locked onto his. "Zalthra." Torin's stomach twisted. "You think she's after the eye?" "I think she's using it." Lyra's voice dropped. The Forgotten Court didn't die holding back entropy. They weaponized it. The eye isn't a relic. It's their last engine. And if she activates it, she won't just erase enemies. She'll rewrite reality itself. Choose who deserves to exist. He stared at her, horror dawning. "That's why she's here. Not for me. For legitimacy. If she marries me, a human who saved Concord royalty, she ties her cause to ours. Makes her vengeance look like justice." Lyra nodded. "And once she has the Concord's blessing, she'll vanish with you into the rift, and begin the unmaking." Torin paced, mind racing. "So I say no. I refuse her." "And trigger a civil war," Lyra said softly. "The Forgotten Court still has loyalists scattered across the 7 empires. Refuse her and they'll rise. Accept her, and we lose everything." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "There's got to be another way." "There is," she said, turning to face him fully. "But it's dangerous, and it requires you to do something no human has ever done." "What?" "Enter the Chamber of Mirrored Souls." Torin had heard of it. An ancient trial deep within the Citadel's core, where one faced reflections of their deepest desires and fears. Few entered. Fewer returned unchanged. "It's the only way to prove your choice isn't driven by fear or ambition," Lyra explained. "The chamber will show you the truth of your heart. And if you survive, your decision will carry the weight of cosmic law. Even Zalthra can't ignore it." He swallowed. "And if I don't survive? Then I'll burn the rift myself," she said, with a quiet ferocity that made his breath catch. That evening, under a sky streaked with auroras, Torin entered the chamber. The doors sealed behind him with a sigh. The air shimmered, and suddenly he wasn't in a room. He was back on Zyrax 7, the desert moon. The suns beat down. He saw himself younger, dirtier, crouched over a trembling purple-skinned girl. "Can I eat with you, human?" He watched as his past self offered her half a protein bar. Then time fractured. He stood in Ziva's lava gardens, crowned in obsidian, ruling a kingdom of fire and fury. Powerful, feared, alone. He walked Silyun's dreaming glade, growing old among trees that sang his name. Peaceful, loved, but always a guest in someone else's world. He dueled Nairi on a salt plain, their bond forged in blood and silence. Respectful, stoic, but cold as winter. He shared a throne with the triplets, their laughter echoing through mirrored halls. Joyful, yet stretched thin across 3 hearts. Then came the visions he hadn't expected. He saw himself with Zalthra in the Dark Rift, standing at the edge of oblivion, erasing tyrants, saving billions, becoming a god of judgment. Felt righteous, felt right. And then Lyra, not as Empress, not in robes, just the 2 of them, in a small cottage on a quiet moon, snow falling gently outside. She was braiding his hair with white strands of her own. They were laughing, eating soup, no crowns, no galaxies, just together. The vision shattered. Torin gasped, back in the chamber on his hands and knees. Tears streaked his face. The truth hit him like a supernova. He didn't want power. He didn't want glory. He wanted her. Not the Empress. The girl who asked for a meal. The woman who fought beside him in the ice spire. The one who believed in him when no one else did. He stumbled out of the chamber at dawn. Changed. The court awaited in the grand reflection hall. Zalthra stood at the center, her shadow cloak swirling like storm clouds. The 7 empresses watched in silence. Lyra stood apart, her expression unreadable. Torin walked forward, no longer afraid. "I've made my choice," he announced, voice steady. Zalthra inclined her head. "Speak it." He turned to her. "You offer me purpose. But purpose without love is just duty in disguise. And I've done enough duty." Her eyes narrowed, black stars flickering with irritation. Then he turned to the other empresses. "To each of you, thank you. Your offers honor me more than I deserve. But my heart isn't a prize to be won. It's already given." All eyes turned to Lyra. She didn't smile. She looked terrified. "Lyra Valeth," Torin said, stepping toward her. "You asked me to choose with my heart. So I am. I choose you. Not as Empress. Not as a political alliance. I choose you. Even if it breaks the concord. Even if it starts a war. Even if it means we end up back in the desert with one cracker between us." The hall erupted. Not in outrage, but in stunned silence. Then Ziva clapped. Slowly, deliberately, others followed. Even the triplets bowed their heads in respect. But Zalthra, she didn't move. "You defy cosmic law," she hissed. "The right of gratitude must be fulfilled." "No," Lyra said, stepping forward, her voice ringing with authority. "The law says the grateful may offer. It doesn't say the grantee must accept. Torin honored us all by considering us. But his choice is his own." Zalthra's cloak flared like a dying star. "Then I withdraw my claim, and declare the concord ungrateful. The forgotten court will rise. The eye will awaken." She vanished in a swirl of shadow and static. Panic surged, but Lyra raised her hand. "Let her go. We'll be ready." Days passed in a blur of war councils, shield upgrades, and fleet mobilizations. Torin, now unofficially bonded to Lyra by court custom, worked alongside engineers to retrofit the citadel's defenses with human ingenuity, wiring pulse cannons with scavenged tech, rerouting power through ice conduits, even teaching guards how to jury-rig plasma rifles from kitchen appliances. He and Lyra stole moments between crises, walking the snow gardens, sharing quiet meals, whispering plans in the dark. She taught him star chants. He taught her how to make Earth-style pancakes, which she declared the most chaotic yet delicious invention in the galaxy. Then, a week before the predicted rift incursion, a coded message arrived not from Zalthra, but from an unknown source inside the Forgotten Court. "The eye is not a weapon, it's a key, and she's lying about its purpose." Torin and Lyra traced the signal to a derelict station orbiting the moon of Cthar, a dead world once used for memory experiments. They went alone, cloaked in stealth skiffs. Inside the station, they found not an armory, but a nursery. Rows of cryopods lined the walls, each containing a child, human, alien, hybrid, suspended in amber light. At the center stood a terminal displaying a single phrase on loop. "Preserve what they would erase." Lyra's breath caught. These are the children of worlds Zalthra unmade. She didn't destroy them. She saved them. Torin accessed the logs. Zalthra's voice filled the chamber, softer, broken. "They called me a monster for erasing history, but I couldn't kill them, so I hid them. The eye doesn't delete, it archives. It folds memories into quantum stasis. I've been preserving the lost, one soul at a time, waiting for a time when the galaxy would be ready to remember." Torin and Lyra stared at each other, the truth crashing over them. Zalthra wasn't a villain. She was a guardian, and she was coming to the Azure Citadel not to conquer but to offer. But as they prepared to return, alarms blared. The station trembled. On the view screen, a fleet appeared, not Zalthra's. The Bone Choir. "They tracked us," Lyra whispered. "They want the children," Torin realized, "to prove the unmaking happened, and use it as propaganda." He activated the station's self-destruct, set to delay. They had minutes. As they raced back to their skiff, a choir warship fired. The station's hull ruptured. Oxygen screamed into vacuum. Torin grabbed Lyra, shoving her into the escape pod just as debris struck the bay. He was thrown backward, tumbling into space. Lyra screamed his name over comms. "Hold on." I'm coming back. No, he gasped, blood bubbling at his lips from the thinning air. Get the children out. Warn the citadel. Static. Then silence. Torin floated, watching the stars blur. He thought of desert moons, shared crackers, snow falling on a quiet cottage. Then a shadow fell over him. Zalthra's barge materialized, tractor beams snaring him gently. She stood in the airlock, her cloak still, her eyes no longer voids, but sorrowful. You would have let yourself die to save them, she said, pulling him inside. I'm just a mechanic, he coughed. Not much use dead. She helped him to a medbay. You chose Lyra. I did. And yet you sacrificed yourself for strangers. He met her gaze. Isn't that what you've been doing? For the first time, the veiled sovereign smiled, thin, sad, but real. Back at the Azure Citadel, Lyra had evacuated the children to a hidden sanctuary, her face streaked with tears and fury. When Torin returned with Zalthra, she nearly crushed him in a hug. You idiot, she sobbed. Don't ever do that again. Only if you promise not to send me to 7 more banquets, he murmured, holding her tight. Zalthra stood apart, watching. Then she stepped forward. I withdraw my claim, she announced. Not out of defeat, but out of hope. You, Torin, have shown me what gratitude truly is. Not obligation, but choice. And you, Lyra, have shown me that the Concord is worth preserving. She turned to the court. Let the children be remembered. Let their worlds be honored. And let this human and this Empress build something new. Not from law, but from love. The court bowed not to power, but to truth. Weeks later, the Azure Citadel hosted a new kind of ceremony. Not a wedding, but a pact of remembrance. Torin and Lyra stood before the restored Heartstone, hands clasped, as the names of the saved children were sung into the stars. Torin still fixed engines. Lyra still ruled empires. But in the evenings, they'd sit on the starlight terrace, wrapped in furs, watching snow fall over a galaxy slowly learning to heal. And somewhere in the dark rift, Zalthra watched over her hidden nursery, whispering to the sleeping children, You are not forgotten. You are loved. But peace, as always, was fragile. For in a distant system, a new signal pulsed, a frequency no one had heard in 10,000 years. The Bone Choir's true master had awakened, and he knew about the children. Torin felt it in his bones the moment the alert came through his wristcom. Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes fierce. Ready to fix another mess? She asked. He grinned, grabbing his tool belt. As long as I've got you beside me. And together, human and Empress, they stepped into the storm once more. The final battle did not come with fanfare or fleets of 1,000 warships. Came quietly, beneath the ice. The Bone Choir's true master, revealed at last to be Vareth Mal, a disgraced Concord archivist who'd once sought to erase history to rewrite it in his own image, had burrowed deep into the glacial roots of the Azure Citadel. There, in ancient tunnels older than the throne itself, he'd built a resonance lattice tuned to the Heartstone. His plan was not to destroy, but to overwrite, to flood the stone with falsified memories, turning Lyra's people against her, twisting gratitude into betrayal, love into suspicion. But he hadn't counted on 2 things, human stubbornness and alien pancakes. Torin and Lyra discovered the lattice not through scanners or spies, but because Torin's boot kicked a loose conduit near the palace's geothermal vents, and the scent of burnt wiring reminded him of his old repair bay on Zyrax 7. Trusting that gut instinct, they followed the hum of corrupted energy deep below the citadel, where ice walls whispered forgotten lullabies and the ground pulsed like a sleeping heart. They found Vareth in the core chamber, his hands buried in the lattice, eyes glowing with stolen data light. You're too late, he sneered. In moments, the Concord will forget her. They'll remember me as their savior. Lyra stepped forward, calm. Memory isn't just data, Vareth. It's shared meals, laughter in snowstorms, hands held in the dark. You can't rewrite that. Watch me, he hissed, and activated the pulse. The citadel shuddered. Lights dimmed. Above, the auroras flickered and died. But nothing else happened. Vareth frowned. Why isn't it working? Torin crossed his arms, grinning. Because I rerouted the Heartstone's main line through the kitchen generator 3 days ago. You're not syncing with planetary memory. You're syncing with the pancake batter mixer. Lyra couldn't help it. She laughed. Even Vareth blinked in confusion. You what? Human tech, Torin said with a shrug. Unpredictable, messy, and full of flour. Your lattice just encoded 10,000 recipes for blueberry voidberry pancakes into the Concord's ancestral memory. As if on cue, alarms blared, not of danger, but of culinary emergency. A royal chef's voice echoed through the vents. Empress, the ceremonial breakfast batter has achieved sentience and is demanding voting rights. Vareth screamed in frustration and lunged, but Lyra raised her hand. Ice erupted from the floor, encasing him in a crystalline prison that hummed with soothing lullabies. Let him sleep, she said. Maybe he'll dream of pancakes too. Peace returned, softer this time. With the threat gone, the Concord held a true union. Not just of empires, but of hearts. Torin and Lyra were married in the snow garden, beneath arches woven from living frost blossoms that bloomed only when touched by joy. The guests included Ziva, who gifted them a fire drake pup named Crumb, Silyun, who planted a tree that would grow Earth-style maple syrup, and even Zalthra, who appeared as a swirl of stardust and left a single cryopod flower that glowed with the names of all the saved children. Torin traded his tool belt for a hybrid role, royal engineer and consort of the Concord. He redesigned the palace's energy grid using human solar principles, built hover sleds for palace messengers, and, much to Lyra's delight, invented a self-stirring soup pot that became a diplomatic sensation. Lyra, in turn, stepped down from absolute rule, reorganizing the Concord into a council where even the smallest moon village had a voice. She still wore her star-forged diadem, but often traded it for a simple circlet when she and Torin stole away to their cottage on the moon of Alunis, where snow fell gently and the auroras danced like old friends. Years passed. Their first child, a girl named Kira, was born with purple-tinged skin and a shock of white hair that crackled with static when she laughed. She could melt ice with a touch and recite engine schematics before she could walk. Their second, a boy named Joran, had Torin's sun-brown skin and Lyra's golden eyes, and an uncanny ability to calm storms by singing off-key lullabies. The palace echoed with the sounds of family. Sticky pancake mornings, snowball fights in the grand hall, bedtime stories about a human who once shared his last cracker with a lost princess. Zalthra, now an honored elder, visited often, bringing the children gifts from the rift, memory crystals that showed extinct galaxies, toys that floated on thought waves, and once, a miniature black hole that they kept in a jar as a nightlight. Don't stare too long, she warned. It winks back. The bone choir faded into myth. The Eye of Morn was placed in the Archive of Whispers, not as a weapon, but as a library. Its quantum folds now used to preserve endangered songs, dying languages, and the laughter of children across the stars. And Torin? He never became a legend. He never wanted to. He was just a man who loved an empress, not because she ruled galaxies, but because she still asked to share his food, even after all these years. One evening, decades later, they sat on the starlight terrace again. Older now, wrapped in furs woven by their grandchildren. The blizzard swirled beyond the shield, but inside, the air was warm with spiced tea and quiet contentment. You ever miss Earth? Lyra asked, resting her head on his shoulder. Nah, he said, squeezing her hand. I found my home the day you asked to eat with me in the sand. She smiled, her golden eyes reflecting the stars. And I found mine the day you said yes. Below them, the citadel glowed, alive with light, laughter, and the quiet hum of 1,000 peaceful lives. And in that moment, beneath a sky full of promise, human and alien, soldier and empress, father and mother, they knew they had everything.